Nintendo has never been a studio known for its sense of realism. Their primary game franchise follows a large-nosed Italian plumber jumping around on these things to save a princess from Micro Godzilla. Even their games more grounded in reality, like Metroid or The Legend of Zelda, still feature their fair share of oddities and are never afraid to shy away from real-world analogs. Now that could be an art direction, or character design, or... no wait, actually, scratch that last one. But in all seriousness, Nintendo's willingness to stray away from the more gritty and realistic direction that other AAA studios are trending towards has allowed them to distinguish themselves from their competitors, and in a way, this quirkiness has become synonymous with the Nintendo brand. But one of the ways Nintendo does this that I don't often see discussed is through their sound design. So today, I'm going to be using Super Mario Galaxy to demonstrate what exactly Nintendo is doing with the sound design in their games, and why it works so well. But for starters, what exactly do I mean when I say non-real sounds? Because the truth is, nearly all games feature the use of some sounds that don't have real-world counterparts. So let's start by sorting these non-real sounds into 4 basic categories. UI sounds, invented sounds, convincing Foley, wrong sounds, and this last one is the focus of today's video. Now, let's go over all of these one at a time. The most obvious example of UI sounds would be menu sounds. The clicks and beeps on a menu obviously don't have real-world counterparts and are rarely ever intended to be a diegetic component of the game. They simply fill a cosmetic role. Every game that has menus of any sort will likely feature UI sounds. Oh, and by the way, ask any sound designer what their favorite part of their job is, and they'll probably tell you it's this. Next is invented sounds. These are diegetic sounds linked to objects or characters in your game that don't exist in the real world. Usually this involves sounds for invented weapons, like the sound of firing the BFG in Doom Eternal. Or creature sounds. You know, like, what sound does this thing make? Our third example of non-real sounds is what I'm calling convincing Foley. This would involve sounds that are analogous to real objects and animals, but are not necessarily representative of the actual sounds these things would make. Sound designers famously use toy guns to emulate the sound of running around while carrying a gun, because real guns don't really make a lot of noise when you're handling them. Certainly not the rattling and shaking sounds you hear when you're running around in Call of Duty or Counter-Strike. Many Foley artists also use watermelons or cantaloupes to get those satisfying crunches and splatters that you hear when you execute a fatality in Mortal Kombat.
People are constantly asking me, what's it like to be a sex symbol?
Fatality.
But finally, let's talk about wrong sounds, the focus of today's video. So what exactly do I mean when I say wrong sounds? Well, in short, they're sounds that very obviously are not analogous to the action that's happening on screen. They're not convincing Foley, where they're trying to recreate a real sound by alternative methods, but are instead sounds that deliberately distinguish themselves from a real-world sound, and in some cases, it's not even clear if the sound being used is intended to be diegetic. Super Mario Galaxy is chock full of these wrong sounds. For instance, listen to the sound when Mario performs a long jump. Do you hear that? It sounds like a slide whistle, just doing a quick fall. Listen again. Or how about the sounds of Bee Mario climbing on honey? So if these sounds are so obviously not real sounds, why do they work so well? Well, to answer that, we need to talk about Mickey Mousing. So what is Mickey Mousing? Well, chances are you are already familiar with it and just didn't know it had a name. It has its roots in 1920s and 1930s cartoon animation, when phonograph and recording technology wasn't really advanced enough to accurately capture precise sounds like footsteps and impact sounds, so the sound design was offloaded to the composer to incorporate into the score. Some of the first examples of it can be seen in early short films made by Walt Disney, such as Trolley Troubles featuring Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and more famously, Steamboat Willie. So what do some of these examples of Mickey Mousing look like? Well, let's take a look at some of them. Hey, that one sounds familiar. But even as recording technology progressed and it became more possible to accurately create real Foley, Mickey Mousing had sort of established itself as a mainstay of the cartoon genre, finding itself in shows like Tom and Jerry, and even in more modern cartoons like... oh geez. So combine the rich cartoon culture of Mickey Mousing with Mario's 8-bit origins, where games were essentially limited to square waves, triangle waves, or noise to convey sound information, and yeah, of course Super Mario Galaxy is going to be using these wrong sounds. It's fun, it's quirky, and nothing about Mario was ever meant to feel or look or sound realistic anyway. That's why it works so well. That's why we never question it, and sometimes don't even notice it, because it just makes sense. And for my fellow sound designers out there, don't be afraid to step outside the box when the game calls for it.